for killing people is like blaming pencil for bad spelling. From hand cannon to assault weapon, from black powder to smokeless powder, ballistic is one of the emerging sector in the world. Forensic ballistics is a branch of forensic science which is devoted towards the study of firearms, its ammunition, explosive, its effect and behavior. To know more about the influence of forensic ballistics on Indian society, we have Dr. Sumit Kumar Chaudhary, Sir, Dean and Assistant Professor, School of Forensic Science and Risk Management, RSU, Gujarat. Sir is an established academician, author, editor, consultant, and an influential thought leader in the field of forensic science. He is an MSc Forensic Science Gold Medalist from NICFS Delhi and also hold PhD in Forensic and Behavioral Sciences. Sir is also the managing editor for International Research Journal on Police Science and Stellar Journal on Forensic Science and covers magazine. His area of research interest includes emerging areas of physical forensic science and forensic biology. I heartily welcome Dr. Sumit sir. Welcome you, sir. We are very glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Sir, basically you were a forensic botany graduate and then you transit yourself into forensic science through your master. So how was this transition from plain science to applied science? Can you share your experience?
I was pursuing my botany honors from Banaras Hindu University in the year 2004 to 7, wherein I came across this advertisement of Forensic Science of National Institute of Criminology and Forensic Science. One of my professors recommended me that Sumit, I think this is also a good career line and a professional line, so you should try to explore this line as well. While I was preparing for many other entrance examinations of TIFR, ISC Bangalore, I thought to give it a chance. And trust me, the journey has been very fulfilling, knowledge-wise and professionally enriching over the years. I joined NICFS. I topped the entrance examination, entered the institution. I taught, in fact, in both criminology and forensic science stream, but choose to pursue forensic science. And then from there onwards, it has been like coming in contact with number of experts, number of eminent forensic academicians, practitioners, field level police officers, judges, and all this helped me to learn and pick the essential elements of this field from all these people, learned people. And that's how I could make a career for myself in this discipline. I've learned a lot, and I must tell that once you keep pursuing the things, you do not leave anything midway. So forensic science is going to give you a very rewarding career. And today, at this point of time with my forensics profession, I'm very happy, very satisfied, and I look forward now to contribute more in this field to whatever I have gained from this field.
Okay, sir. So you are in gold medalist. So back in your campus life, were you such a studious person who was only on to books?
Honestly, I was never a very studious person, but I kept myself apprised of all the developments that were happening. Listening the lectures of very erudite speakers on forensics helped me to learn a lot of things which perhaps even books could not have explained. A lot of field elements I could learn. And since I started getting the top position from semester 1 itself, so I could see the gold medal coming, honestly, by the end of second semester, because the difference was a yawning gap between me and the second position. So yes, I was expecting the gold medalist, despite I was not a very studious student. But in forensics, I'll tell you, if you have experience from other related fields also, if you keep on listening to all the developments that are happening around, equip you for a better better delivery mode rather than just reading the books. Books are okay; it creates you a fundamentally prepared person in terms of forensic practices. But the other knowledge that you gain through everything, even sports also, even quizzes also, even extracurricular, co-curricular activities, talking to the people, listening to the news, international developments. They all make you the complete package that is required in forensic science. You can't alone be a book reader.
Okay, sir. Sir, you are actually a consultant, a teacher, a trainer, and you hold such a multiple roles very smoothly. So among these, which one fascinates you more?
Uh, I've never segregated all these areas. Whenever I am into my office, I see that the entire day is, spent in proportion to all of this, because I start my day with meetings, obviously, either university level meetings or department level meetings. And in the meetings, I get to know about a lot of proposals, which are basically my role as a consultant. So I do also engage in a lot of policy formulations and framework. I do write a lot on forensic policies of the country. And presently I'm authoring a book also on forensic history of the country. So basically, whatever I deliver, suppose if I go for a training, that experience comes from my teaching and research. So I bring the elements of teaching and research into my training component. When I go into consultancy, again, it is the practice and the research and the background of the theoretical background that you have. You all bring this. So ideally, I have never segregated this field. I've enjoyed all of this. The forensics has been such a wonderful journey for me, and I've amalgamated all these domains of functioning of a forensic scientist into one. I always feel that a good research can only happen when you have a good problem coming from the field. So consultancy is very important. Unless you are a case consultant, you cannot you would not be able to take up good research areas for your research. And mind it, this is the decade when we should not only be doing theoretical research should be applied, so that somebody harps the benefit of your research into law enforcement, into investigation. So that kind of thing we are looking forward to. So I enjoy teaching thoroughly, yes, training again very much, research, consultancy, everything.
Sir, as a academician, you have to continuously update yourself. So what all aid you prefer for a reference and for preparing notes and all?
One important thing that I keep on doing is I keep on talking a lot with my fraternal colleagues across the globe. I do consult a lot of forensic people, those who are working in the labs, so that give me a glimpse of what are the current problems that are going on, what is the new kind of technique they employed in investigating something. So this is one way. The other way is, something which is not happening in the country and something which is not happening in the practitioner setup. So you'll have to refer to the research papers. So as a matter of fact, I should refer some of the books, some of the small short notes which gets published, uh, some of the social media updates. So now most of the advancements in the field are available on social media also. So I'm attached to many groups, associations. I do read a lot of research update articles which are sent to us through various associations, and all this together cumulatively prepare us for or apprise us with the new advancements. And this is very essential. If anybody who wants to survive and do well in the field, he has to be open and very receptive. He will have to accept the knowledge coming from anywhere, any form. Mind it, at times you'll feel that this part is not relevant, but never leave anything. Whatever it comes, please accept it. It will prove its relevance at some point of time.
Okay, sir. So you are telling that every piece of knowledge is essential and it is cherishable.
I'll give you a
Sir,
small example. Azam. Somebody was investigating a speaker recognition case, voice examination. And in the method, when he had prepared the transcript, he had prepared the transcript wrongly, only because he did not knew the abusive languages that were used. The entire audio was full of abusive languages. So thanks to my hostel days, when among the boys, this is a very common practice using some languages, and I could make out that the transcript has been wrongly prepared, and so it was corrected by me. So this is not for your recording purpose, but still, that's where the entire gamut of knowledge is very important.
Yes, yes. Sir, so while teaching, what all were the challenges that you faced with regard to this field, forensic ballistics or forensic science?
Honestly speaking, I have been talking to many my counterparts, faculties in different institutions. They approach me as to, that ballistics is tough to teach, students do not grasp. My experience for the last 10 years has been entirely different. And I have felt that students take forensic ballistics as a most interesting paper. Firearm was a fantasy since childhood for many. Even for toys also, many people, many kids, they prefer firearms, small bullets for, trying their hands on them. Or even from fantasies, from whatever movie or web series, whatever is coming. So for me, I have seen that the ballistic students are doing extremely well. So the only thing that you'll have to start from the basics. You do not need to jump on the external ballistics and terminal ballistics and talk of the very technical terms in the beginning itself. You'll have to talk to the students in the language they understand. First of all, it should be very introductory. Spend as many lectures as possible on building the fundamentals. I've never rushed through the syllabus. I've spent, I think, my students would testify that I've spent most part in the unit one itself, which is, foundation part. And I trust them that when they are confident of the unit one, any book that they would read, any research paper that they would read, any video lectures that they would hear, they'll be able to understand and grasp the entire concept. So you'll have to relate the various concepts in a very fundamental way. You'll have to start on a basic level, spend time with the students, let them all understand every part of the firearm and ammunition, how the firing is done. Once the bullet is out of the muzzle, they are not going to face any difficulty. So that problem relies only up to muzzle. So that's the role of the teacher, to hold the hands of the student, bring them up to there, and make them comfortable, encourage them to ask questions, think about, absurd ways of imagination. Let it be anything, and answer their queries. So that is one way I feel that, they can be, confidence can be developed in them.
Sir, it is like indeed a nice method. Like you are giving them the all sort of possibilities to think and also to have their own opinion. It's
And
really
one more thing is very important, that is hands-on. Uh, if they will, touch the firearm, if they'll touch the bullets, they are going to understand it more. Same, if the universities, if the institutions range, so they are going to grasp it more. So always complement the theories with practical approach. So once they are into this now, as a new initiative, what I'm going to do is we are now involving our students into consultancy works. So even they learn the craft of forensic science on actual cases. So that will also help them, to learn a lot.
yes, yes. Sir, from your experience, which aspect of forensic ballistics do you think is less explored in India?
See, normally the three branches are considered as far as practice is concerned. One is internal ballistics, the other is external, and third is terminal or wound ballistics. Some authors also talk about intermediate ballistics, but that is of less relevance as far as forensic practice is concerned, investigations are concerned. See, the internal you cannot ignore, because the entire interaction of bullet, cartridge case, and the firearm happens in the internal ballistics, and that is what you observe and examine under the comparison microscope to establish the linkage of suspected firearms or suspected cartridge case with the other counterpart. So internal is the what we do in bulk in the country. The wound ballistics or the terminal part is definitely taken care by people of forensic medicine, who examine the body, the kind of wound, the kind of entry and exit route, the range of firing, and all those aspects which are crucial part of investigation, which can help you to reach to the suspect or to the victim. So, in that sense, internal and terminal are very well investigated, very deeply investigated and consulted in Indian scenario. As far as external is concerned, there have been, cases where forensic experts, forensic medicine experts, law enforcement experts have gone onto the field to investigate the shooting scene. They have tried to reconstruct it, but the entire reconstruction remains on the route of entry, route of exit, the position of shooter, position of victim. They're still not played with the air resistance, humidity, and other factors which might have an impact over the travel of the bullet, trajectory of the bullet. Also, the bullet shape, the kind of firearm, and bullet combinations. Those are the factors for which external ballistics is slightly less explored. And there's no harm in that, because not all cases require the inputs of external ballistics. Most of the cases require linkage of firearm and the bullet, which can easily be done and within the four walls of laboratory with the help of your comparison microscope and your fellow experts.
Okay, sir. Among this aspect, which one is your favorite?
Again, I've never thought on this, but since you're posing this question, perhaps I like all the three.
Okay, sir. Sir, recently our Arms Act was amended, like, and one of the major proposal was one person, one gun. And this Arms Act is such a 60-year-old act. So why was there a need to revise it now or amend it now? What do you think the probable reasons would be?
The Arms Act was amended by the recent government, the present government, in the year 2019, and the bill was passed. Amendment bill was passed. See, when the 1959 the bill was enacted, the Arms Act, the conditions of the country were very different. The financial position, the socio-demographic factors, and all those social scenario, economic factors, they were very different from what we are witnessing today. So, of course, we need to customize ourselves with the changing scenario. That is the first reason. Number two, you asked about one gun, one man, one gun policy. It is very important, Nazla. If you are following the shooting incidences, the mass shooting incidences that are happening in the schools of United States, that happened last year in the New Zealand mosque, if you do not control the number of firearms which are publicly available, and which can put people on make people vulnerable, you as a society are going to suffer huge setback and injury. Thus, if one man, one gun policy is implemented, we should completely appreciate it, as it is going to reduce the number of firearms which can be threat to public life and property in available in open among us. So this is a very appreciable step which the government has taken. With this, I am sure the number of firearms would reduce, and proportionately the threats would also reduce. Also, what the government has done is the provision of issuing firearms have to made they have made stringent, which is also a welcome step. The firearm licenses should not be issued openly, and this is the same debate which is going on in United States, where they have a very easy licensing structure, and because of which lot of people have access to firearms, and even in slightest of strain situation, they just open up with their firearms, their frustrations, and lot of innocent peoples and victims are killed, which needs to be condemned, ridiculed, and the government of United States should reconsider, their policies of licensing. I'm happy that Indian government is a more sensitive public authority on this issue.
Okay, sir. So while considering Arms Act, do you still think there are certain provisions which are outdated on today's context, even after the amendment?
Different people will hold different opinions on this. For me, I think the government has taken care of most of the such sections which were there. And in 2009 amendment, the exercise has been very comprehensive. Though few people had different other ideas also, to get amended, but the way the government has placed it, and the sections that they have touched upon, the punishments that they have increased, especially if you see the Naxals and they used to loot the guns of our security personnel. So all those areas have been touched, and the punishments have increased. So the policies have become very stringent for people who wanted access. The punishments as deterrent measures have been increased, And this is the entire, the purpose of a policy, that the people should feel safe, that the people who have been victimized under any of the provisions of these, then the culprit should be punished with a punitive provision which is very deterrent to him. So less people resort to committing those crimes. Thus, I think the government has taken care more of the provisions, but also as a matter of policy, I would suggest that the DFS should come forward and make a consultative group of forensic ballistics. So whenever there is such kind of amendment exercise taken by the government, so the forensic headquarters of the country, the nodal forensic body of the country, should deliberate upon the issue, should find out the emerging issues concerned with the forensic examination, the challenges, what is posing a problem to forensic scientists. And based on the report of consultative group on forensic ballistics, or like any other subject, they should submit a report to the MHA, based on which the government will also consider. Similarly, the law enforcement should also submit the recommendation. If all the stakeholders can raise their concern in a nice manner, that will help the government to frame good policies for us. As of now, whatever was formulated, there are a number of forensic ballistic experts in different labs as well as in academic institutions. They should have been consulted by DFSs, which could have facilitated, a more concerted effort could have, done.
Okay, sir. Sir, since you can possess one firearm according to new country rules, so which one would that be?
I do not, but on a personal level, I do not wish to keep a firearm. Thanks to the country and people around me who make me feel very safe. And I've never felt the requirement of a firearm. And I would suggest if somebody don't feel the requirement of a firearm, please don't have it. It can be, sometimes accidental things might happen in your life. So it's good to be keeping away with all this.
Sir, coming to an investigation where firearm is involved, range of fire is very significant. So, how relevant is range of fire from a firearm when in a case where there is a dispute between suicide and homicide?
Range of firing is a fundamental concept of forensic ballistics, which is very crucial in investigations, especially in cases of homicide, suicide. You know, uh, range of fire helps you to determine the relative position of the shooter. Also, sometimes the range of firearm is important because based on that, the court can take a decision whether there was an imminent impending threat on the person who has committed a murder under the plea that that was for his own safety. So to save oneself, if somebody commits a murder, then the range becomes a very deciding factor. That what was the imminent looming threat of number one. Then the range of fire in forensic ballistics also helps you to determine the kind of firearm and cartridge combination that could have been used. In India, one of the major problems that appears on a routine basis is the problem of country-made firearms. The menace is almost 10 times proportionately higher than the regular licensed firearms. Now, the country-made firearms can behave very erratically. The cartridge, which are mostly standard cartridges and ammunitions, are used in this country-made firearms. The problem is that if the barrel and the chambers are not fitting, it can have different effect on the trajectory and movement of the projectile. The projectile can behave erratically, and in such cases, the experts can be misled in determining the range of firing. Thus, the forensic experts needs to be very careful in determining the range of firing, and there are various techniques through which the firearm ranges are determined. Some most important conclusion that we draw from this is the position of the shooter, relative position of the shooter, and relative position of the victim, which is also important in determining other forensic ballistic aspects like what was the route of entry, what was the route of exit, whether the GSR would be present up to certain level, whether the GSR would also be present on the cloths of the victims. So all those things will help you in determining number of other associated factors in forensic ballistics.
Yes, sir. So, is improvised firearms a challenge to forensic ballistic experts?
Absolutely, a great challenge, especially in country like India. I do not know if any other country suffers this menace as much as we suffer. We have this kind of industries and small factories, so-called industries and small factories developing like mushrooming everywhere. There are specialized zones identified where this have grown into a proportion which has not been controlled by the law enforcement. The areas near Meerut, the Munger weapons, these are very populous now, and these people have acquired this craft through which they are now imitating even the top assault rifles, which is a dangerous sign. This is this is the only source of perhaps employment them, so they are not stopping themselves from making more firearms. But what is the effect on the country? We will try to understand the cost of a crime. If some person is murdered, the entire expenditure of the country on his demise is huge. It's not only one employed person or a person has been murdered. It is the cost of the judiciary, cost of the prosecution, cost of number of trials. One case takes almost 2 to 5 years to 7 years to sometimes many years to decide. All this during this year, the expenditures on all the systems which keeps on investigating the crime, which keeps on prosecuting the crime is huge. Thus, the country made firearms which are difficult to handle. The best way is to by enforce the legal provisions of Arm Acts and completely curb this kind of industries or setups, whichever area they are existing in today. And in 2019 amendment of the Arms Act, the government has made a very strong provisions in this regard. Only thing that we now need to do is to identify such pockets where this factories are thriving, and to shut down them immediately and let the law deal with them in a very harsh way and punish those people who are compromising with the peace and tranquility of the nation.
Yes, sir. Sir, improvised explosive devices mediated terrorist attacks are now frequent in our country. So, how are they analyzed, or is it difficult to detect them?
I would not say they're difficult to detect. Only thing is you should be able to identify them. Most many times this IEDs or improvised firearms, they resemble like an innocent object. So at the first place you may not be able to cast a suspicion on this. So that is one of the biggest challenge. Once you are sure that the particular object can be an improvised explosive device, we in our country have expertise in almost in every state and with even the central agencies that they can handle this kind of IEDs, they can diffuse them. That is preventive measure. The second part is investigative part. The IEDs are now a typical routine feature in our country, and for investigation purpose, not that many blasts are happening, but IEDs are recovered and dealt by law enforcement agencies. So in a way, while for the almost almost a decade now, India has witnessed less number of explosions and less number of some kind of problems, thanks to our law enforcement agencies who are on the vigil, constant vigil. But as far as forensic investigation is concerned, we take care of few things. One is that yes, we try to identify the explosive which has been used, the explosive material. So that can be identified. We have SOPs and physical and chemical methods and instrumental methods through which it can be identified. Number two is the amount of explosives. We have mathematical provisions. We have formula based on crater and many other things through which we try to evaluate a rough estimate of the explosive amount that could have been used. Then the third is what is the mechanism of IED. So it is the most important and crucial part, which wherein a forensic expert needs to be very careful. There are different kind of mechanisms, time delay mechanisms, which are used to explode the firearms or this train of explosives, explosive trains. So one need to identify the detonator, detonating mechanism, time delay mechanism, and all other related aspects. And that has to be done very carefully because there are a number of crude methods of developing explosives, which can sometimes be very confusing.
Okay, sir. So now PUBG is very popular game, and a lot of youngsters, and not only youngsters, all age groups are, due to the COVID, everyone is engaged in that game, and the game is offering its players a number of weapons. Like they have a variety of snipers, submachine guns, assault weapons, each with different attachments. So, as an academician, how will you comment on the influence of PUBG on Indian society? Is it a boon or a bane?
Uh, Instead of jumping onto the conclusion of whether it is a boon or bane, uh, I'll always suggest that there are two approaches to this entire issue. One is that yes, it's a game and a great entertainment. Sure, that's why many youth are attached to it. I've never played it, but still I have heard a lot, so I'm sure. And thus, the creators of the game needs to be congratulated. You know, they make a lot of efforts in creating such attractive animations, and their craftsmanship has to be appreciated. The second approach is how it is affecting us. I wish I was a child psychologist, so I would have been in a better position to comment. But still, donning the role of a psychologist on a temporary basis, what I would say is that I've come across number of research papers and research talks where people have said that once you resort to playing such violent games, not only PUBG, I'm talking about a very generic situation, be it any game, if the using the game is addictive, it is more than what we should normally play, the time that we spend, if it is too much, and if the game has elements of violence into it, and if a person is exposed to this constant violence on a longitudinal basis, that means there are going to be repercussions, and you are going to suffer. This kind of to be more aggressive in their adolescence, in their growth phases, and ultimately that becomes part of your nature. There are certain meta-analytical reports which counter argue this fact also. They say that no, it is not effective, but anything we have, we also study toxicology, and we say that the dose decides what is the poison, right? So anything in overdose is not acceptable. So even this kind of guns, games, or exposure to such kind of assault rifles, killings in multitude, even on a video screen, on a game, it is going to definitely have an impact on your psyche. And in such case, you are going to suffer badly. Your relationship with your family, your people around us would get impacted. One of the major problems that has happened in this COVID, and the problems that are being referred to the psychologists these days, is that in the lockdown, most of the family members are now addicted to their mobiles. And during use of the mobiles, excessive use, they have excessively used these games also. So it is important that we are sensitized. The small kids are sensitized as to what is the extent to which they should go and play this kind of games, and similarly the parents have to be sensitized as to how much they need to increase their involvement with their kids, how to counsel them, and based on this, I'm sure we can improve upon. However, there is no specific study on PUBG which has been done on a longitudinal basis to prove that PUBG has had any adverse impact. But still, I would like to say my kids and suggest them to use it in a limited fashion, only for the entertainment purpose, and not it go over their head.
Okay, sir. Sir, now the most anticipated question, like, is forensic ballistic a promising career?
Uh, I would give a mixed response on this. As far as my personal opinion goes, yes, it is one of the most promising career, one of the most exciting career, and I'm enjoying it. As far as the second part is, as far as the scenario of the country is concerned, we do not have many private labs which can, deal with forensic ballistics. So that is one limitation. That curtails the number of employment opportunities as a whole. As far as government labs are concerned, the vacancies are few, and there is a huge reluctancy on the part of the setup to accept the people from BSc forensic science background, MSc forensic science background, for their own, prejudiced notions. I do not see a merit. If they want to take a word from an academician like me, I'll just want to tell and appeal to them, the people who are managing the governance of forensic science in our country, that as an academician, I've dealt with pure science people, I've dealt with BSc forensic science people, and I've dealt with MSc forensic science. Let me very authentically tell them all that the students of BSc Forensic Science or MSc Forensic Science are in no way less than the people of pure forensic science. And they are equally competent and sometimes even more competent. Thus, they should be given an opportunity, they should be tried, and let them also make a career because they've dedicated their life to this forensic science. And that will also save your cost to train a pure science person who comes, after doing pure science and then he joins a lab. You need to train him and spend a lot of money and resources on it. So make it a level playing field. Let the best people join. Open up your recruitment rules. Allow all the stream to compete, come and join you. I'm sure in coming days, this barriers would be removed and the students of all the streams, be it pure science or forensic science, they would be able to make a career, very good and rewarding career for themselves. Also to mention that there's a lot of vacancies which are there in all the forensic labs. Dear heads of this lab, dear governance structure of this lab, please open up the vacancies, let the student enter, let them work for you, let them work upon the pendency of the huge asset. Thank you, Nazla.
Thank you, sir. It was one of the fruitful session. I thank you personally for sparing time despite of your busy schedule, and on such a short notice you were here and you all shared such wonderful session, and it was quite inspiring for whoever watching, sir. So I heartily thank you, sir.
I would personally like to thank Farinda sir for giving this opportunity, and of course you, Nazla, having interviewed me in a very wonderful manner. You made me comfortable at the outset, and the biggest thanks go to Madonna, one of my students who kept me pushing for all this. And of late, I'm here only because of her. She had requested me to give an article also, which I could not do in. So my apologies for that, but I'm sure I've compensated to some extent by appearing here. And once again, thanks to Clue for Evidence and Faninda ji. We are, of course, extending our association now, and please convey him my thankfulness.
Okay, sir. Thank you.